webinar is being live streamed and this webinar is being recorded. So that means we can start, inshallah. Okay. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Thank you so much for coming today. Welcome and good evening. My name is, as you can see on there, Mariam. Okay, I am a project coordinator at Nisa Helpline, and I will be your host for today. So thank you so much for joining our 7th workshop, right? This is our 7th workshop of the year. We have 6 more workshops that we already did. All of the recordings, the self-help guides, everything is available for you guys online, just like this session will be as well. And all of these workshops are presented to you in collaboration with Bell Let's Talk. Through this partnership with Bell, we're hosting all these number of series, and they're collectively called Her Wellness Journey. So they're about your wellness, inshallah. These workshops are designed to improve your access to social support, build self-esteem, and emotional well-being. Now, before we begin, a few rules just to ensure that our workshop runs very smooth. Number 1, I hope your mics stay muted the whole time so the session is uninterrupted. Number 2, if you guys have any questions at all, right, at the bottom of the screen or at the bar, there should be a Q&A button. So you can submit your question over there. We will either reply back to you on text or it will be asked live. All right, and Zainab is going to be an interactive, presenter, inshallah. So please, stay alert for the time, and she'll ask you for your questions. Okay, and of course, we will also be sharing some polling questions during the presentation, just once again to keep you guys engaged and help us understand your needs and preferences. All right. That actually means I am going to launch a few polls right now. So if you guys can take less than a minute to fill them, inshallah, that'll be awesome. So launch the first poll. Yay, you guys see the poll. I can see Zainab's expression.
I was gonna say, I can see the poll. That's awesome.
It's nice, you're very expressive, so I can tell from your expression, you're like, okay. Yay, we're getting our answers in. So we have quite a few from Quebec. That's nice. From Alberta, British Columbia, outside of Canada. Okay. Okay, Ontario as well, yeah. No one from Manitoba, New Brunswick, or the other places. It's funny because at one point of my life, I was considering moving to Manitoba. So I might have been that one vote over there. Okay, so we have 17 out of 17 answered. That means our poll is done. Actually, no, 3 or 4 people are left. If you guys can also do your poll. I will take maybe 3 or 5 more seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And poll. Hey, you guys can all see the results, right? These are the results for you guys to take a look at as well. We have quite a few joining us from all over Canada. That's nice. Maybe a few from outside Canada too. That's nice. Now we have 2 more questions, inshallah. Once again, a few more seconds of your time. Okay, before we actually get into the full presentation. Now let me just go back. Okay, please take a second to fill this poll out as well. You are not obligated to answer if you don't want to. I forgot to mention that before, but yeah, no obligation on you guys.
As well,
yes, everything
right?
is anonymous. Yes.
Throughout the whole presentation.
Yes. Okay, thank you for your participation, guys. All right, so after this question, one last one. Okay. And then inshallah, it's a super easy question. How did you find out about us? over here, it's kind of funny that Nisa Helpline has been here for 10 years now. And I actually, yes, 10 years. You know, we were launched in 2014. I personally only learned about Nisa, I think, because of a friend, even though they're pretty active on social media. But I only learned about them because of a friend, and she was, you know, fundraising for Nisa Helpline. That's how I knew about it. And I joined Nisa Helpline just 2 months ago. So yeah, I was pretty shocked, you know, that such an essential service has been here for 10 years now. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for your participation. We are good with this poll question as well. A lot of you guys are here from social media, which is fun. And some of you guys from email too, cool. Okay, so now let us go and move forward with the opening remarks. Introducing Zainab. Zainab is a psychotherapist and founder of wellnest.ca, which is a Toronto-based mental health clinic. The wellness team is actually collective of diverse psychotherapists. Their main focus is on supporting the needs of the BIPOC community. And what is the BIPOC community? It stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. All right. Now, as a trauma therapist, her approach is client-centered, anti-racist or anti-oppressive, and trauma-informed, incorporating various therapeutic modalities. Zainab also uses somatic-based therapy to help clients heal and manage trauma experiences. She supports clients in accessing greater connectedness to their inner wisdom and peace. That sounds very fascinating. Please join me in welcoming Zainab. Assalamu alaikum, Zainab. How are you doing this fine evening?
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me, and for everyone here who's joining us, but also for everyone that participated. It's really interesting to see a bit about folks joining here and to get a sense of your ages. I can't see your faces. So this is the closest I'll get to getting to know you as a community here joining us.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Mariam.
No, thank you, Zainab. You're saying?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mariam is going to be helping me today with all the technical things that need to go on. I'm just going to close this because I can't see my screen, and I hope that doesn't get rid of the poll here. Because I noticed that I can't, that's not something we tested out. Oh, okay. Okay, let me just close this if I could. Lovely. Okay.
Awesome. All right, so we are delighted to have you, Zainab, as our speaker for tonight. Okay, and you can, inshallah, take the stage.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. I'm setting my timer here because I work best with timers. So I know I'm within that 40 minutes, but I'll start from here then, inshallah. Thank you for the introduction. And again, thank you for everyone joining. We're here talking about people-pleasing behaviors and overcoming people-pleasing behaviors. I'd like to start off this presentation, but just obviously a land acknowledgement. And it looks like many of you are from all over the country. And so this is appropriate then for me to have a land acknowledgement that actually acknowledges many of the places here across Canada. And so I'll just start off by reading this with great respect. We acknowledge the past, present, and future Indigenous peoples as the original inhabitants and traditional guardians of this land that we call Canada, what is now North America. We acknowledge the devastating impact of colonization on Indigenous communities, cultures, languages, and homelands. We acknowledge our responsibility as settlers and newcomers to this country for allyship, out of support for Indigenous rights to be restored and commit ourselves to the journey of healing. Today, we honor the more than 630 First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Mariam already went over this introduction, so I'm not going to introduce myself. But all I'm gonna say is that, you know, because so much of my work is so focused on trauma and supporting the BIPOC communities, this topic specifically when Nisa reached out to me. I was so, first of all, so grateful to join the Nisa community, but also to be able to talk about something that I see presenting so frequently in a lot of the folks that I support, and a lot of what shows up at Wellness for us as a virtual mental health clinic. So I'd like to start off with some agenda to help you, or some items on the agenda to help you get a sense of the roadmap today or what you're in for today. And so we'll start off with a bit of a reflective practice. I've actually shortened the practice after running the presentation so that I can make sure you are getting the most out of this presentation. We'll go through definitions, habits, and signs so you can get a sense of what we're talking about. We'll also talk a little bit about, I want to run you through, what is behind this behavior, and then how can you disrupt the pattern, but understanding the impact on you. And we'll end with some practical tools. And Nisa has done a beautiful job of also actually collating a lot of the information to present to you in a toolkit. And so I'll briefly go over some of these practical tools, but we'll also be sending you home with some more tools to leave with. And then we'll end, inshallah, with a closing mindfulness practice and an affirmation practice. It's a coupled practice. So we're going to break the ice, but as you noticed, and you can see on my screen, I can see questions. Mariam will also be helping me through this. Of course, feel free at any point if you have a thought or if you have a question to put it into the chat function, and I will get to it once, let's say I'm done a slide or so on. I also want to be cognizant, and I'll remind you of this again, that if during this presentation, oftentimes when we talk about difficult experiences that can lead to these kind of behaviors or tendencies and defense mechanisms, it could bring up negative emotions for us. And so you have permission to take a break, to leave, to pause things and come back, to do something that can help you regulate. Don't feel a sense of being compelled to obviously do this. There is a sense of, obviously, everyone here is anonymous. So I hope this also helps us create a more safe community today, at least, as we talk about something that's so, that can, elicit a lot of negative emotions for us. So the icebreaker here that we're going to start with is a bit of a reflective practice. Being mindful of the time, I don't want to spend too much. I have a scenario here for you, but what I'm going to do is actually run you through the scenario. So here's the reflective practice. I'm taking you on a journey here, inshallah, today to get a sense of people-pleasing behavior and how we can disrupt these patterns. A part of that is an invitation for you to start to think about what makes up your experience, or think about how you can build awareness of your experience. And oftentimes, if you've been to therapy or if you're considering therapy, some of the things that we tend to start off with as foundations of building awareness is by starting to label some of our experiences. And that shows up as thoughts. So thoughts are often words, sentences, images, or memories that show up. That can show up as emotions, words like sad, mad, happy, scared. It could also show up as actions. That's a part of your experience. So an action is doing something, saying yes, over scheduling, picking up that phone call, making that cake that you really didn't want to make, so on and so forth. And then physical sensations, which are very important, especially with my background in somatic work and kind of bringing in our entire system. And physical sensations can show up as temperature, heat, cold. It could show up as a sense of tightness or openness or lightness. It can also show up in movement. So there's a sense of like wanting to get up, or maybe a sense of wanting to open up. Even though that's an action, there are physical sensations that signal that for you. So the icebreaker is this. I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and we actually have a poll here for you where I'm going to get a sense of how it feels for you. I want you to think about people pleasing and how it shows up. Many of you who might be joining us might have a sense of like, hey, am I a people pleaser? Or yes, I'm definitely a people pleaser. People have called me way too nice and I say yes to everything. Or there's someone in your life who you want to understand a little bit more as well, who displays maybe people-pleasing behaviors. And so I want you to think of what comes up for you in thoughts, emotions, actions, or physical sensations, either generally or as you consider a few options here, a few scenarios here for you. One really quick scenario, 4:45, you're supposed to end at 5. You're on a work call, you're in your PJs, you just want to get out so you can watch Love is Blind or whatever TV show that you want to watch, and you just want to relax. And on the call, while everybody's there, one of your coworkers tells you, the Monday deadline, I procrastinated and I really need your help. You're the only one who can help me. So everyone's there watching and you're considering your next, obviously, action. I want you to think about, what comes to mind? That you're automatically going to say yes, that you're going to think, oh my God, what is everyone going to think about me? That you're choking up, that you're just like, all right, throw in the PJs and just staying here for the next 3 hours. Another one could be you're at, your in-laws' house and the entire family's there and you're a newlywed. And you show up there and everyone's like, hey, X, Maryam, you gotta, tomorrow, you have a massage booked, you have a facial, you haven't had one in like 3 years, and you finally got that appointment. And then they're like, no, tomorrow we're actually going on a picnic. Yeah, it's just decided you have to make that cake that everybody loves. We really want you there. What comes to mind? What kind of thoughts, what kind of emotions, how do you want to go about it, especially when people are there watching you? So work, family, and then friends. Maybe you booked a day to yourself and your friends really need you to help you edit that one paper that they procrastinated on for a whole week. And you're the only one who can edit this paper for them. At 10 p.m. when you've already been setting the habits to sleep at 11 every night. And then they come and hit you with this and kind of ask for your thoughts. So I'll kind of let that land for you and see how it's showing up. And what some answers or what shows up in your experience. That's not the poll. This is just a question. It's an open question. So you can let us know in, okay, I love it. Okay, people are already saying they exhibit that. Just let's go with it. Okay. So lovely. Okay. And if you have a chance to write in the chat, I want you to tell me some of the thoughts, like some of the thoughts that go through your mind, some of the emotions that you have. Just really quickly, a few words here. Oh, okay. Yes, for all. Reem has mentioned, okay. Sorry to read that out. I think it's supposed to be anonymous, but can folks see it?
They can see each other's names, yes.
But they can't see all of their names.
When
but
it's
on my
everyone,
screen, can you see their names?
When they're texting, they can see each other's names, but when it's to only hosts and panelists, then only you can see the.
Got it. Okay, I won't be reading this out loud then. I was like, what? I can see people's names. Okay, great. Well, everything's confidential with me, but I just wanted to make sure. You can't make that. Some of you are negotiating, which is lovely. Hey, I'll buy it at the bakery. Some of you are saying yes to all, especially if they're really pushing. Okay, great questions here. How does someone kind of know, like, if you're relieving a burden or from a believer, or you're doing this out of fear and trauma? For work, I'll straight up say yes or no. That's great. You're identifying an area in your life. So this is lovely. Some of you are identifying that, hey, okay, how do I tell this is a problem? Others are saying in certain areas of my life, I'll definitely be able to say no, but in other areas, I won't be able to say no. Lovely. So, some of your questions might already be answered as we go through this. So keep that in mind. And it's lovely that I saw some of these because then I can address them as well. What is people pleasing? First of all, I want to start off by saying, especially with therapy talk in, on social media and so much exposure to information about our mental health, we can be overdiagnosing ourselves. And what's really important to recognize is that people pleasing is not a diagnosis, not a mental health disorder that you get diagnosed for. It is a personality trait that could be, of course, associated with other mental health concerns that you might have been diagnosed for or that you might be struggling with, but in and of itself is not a diagnosis. It is a pattern of feelings, thoughts, and actions, like we mentioned, that center on overly focusing on relationships with others. So it is a bit of a compulsive pattern. There's often an anxiety that shows up and you relieve it through this behavior. You're not doing it from a place where you feel grounded to say, yes, I can help this, and I do have capacity within myself to be able to help this person that's asking for X, Y, and Z. And so to answer some of, or touch on that question that was asked, like, how do I know the difference? The difference is that fear and trauma is a pattern when it's stemming out of fear and trauma. It's something that continues to happen in many areas of your life, and it's actually interfering with your life, as opposed to you're relieving, maybe some of the burdens of someone around you. It is a compulsive pattern, like I said, which a person helps, caretakes, and rescues everyone around them, both in their professional or personal life. So here are some signs and polls, which is when the poll was supposed to show with the polls, but I've already brought up some of these polls. So some of these signs or habits that you have here, and you can come back to, of course, as you rewatch this or look over the toolkit, but some of the signs are really focused on difficulty saying no and setting healthy boundaries for yourself. There's quite a theme of a lot of fear or stress that comes up when you think about disappointing someone or displeasing someone. So that's also a marked difference over here. Being assertive and speaking up is hard for you, and you're afraid of conflict and you tend to avoid it. So you tend to not be able to stand up or negotiate your needs. There's a strong need to be liked and gain approval, obviously, in every setting. And as we go through this, I want you to think that every single human being has these tendencies to a certain extent. We all have these desires to want to be liked, to not, to have difficulty saying no in certain situations, to struggle with a boundary. This doesn't automatically mean that you are displaying people-pleasing behavior. I want you to think as a pattern of your life, and something that consistently happens over and over again is when it shows up as a problem. There's also suppression of negative emotions that comes up maybe very easily to you, and that you go out of your way to do a lot of favors and be generous when you clearly know that you're going to be at a disadvantage doing them. And Mariam, can you keep track of some of the questions in case I need to?
Yes.
Just raise a hand. Okay. And so this is where some of your questions I think are important to consider when we talk about, okay, we have a duty, obviously, as Muslims to relieve pain around us. There is a sense of spiritual obligation that many of us feel, obviously, to practice compassion in this way. But I like to think of compassion as a two-way stream always. You are practicing compassion towards yourself and other people. And we'll talk a lot more about, well, how does this affect you if you are not being equally compassionate to yourself and advocating for yourself, as well as you're advocating for other people. So in and of itself, people pleasing as a behavior is not inherently damaging. The problem is when it becomes compulsive and habitual again. And that becomes damaging, actually, not just you, but to other relationships in your life as well. So let's talk about the cost. What are some of those costs that we talk about? And I want you to keep in mind, like, is that a part of your experience? Do you notice it showing up? One is it's easy to become bitter and resentful. So when you are people pleasing, there is a sense of wanting to be acknowledged, actually. You do want to be recognized for the work that you're doing. You might also be doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but when it becomes a pattern, it's habitual, and you're overlooking your own needs, and you're kind of burning out in that way, you're also doing it because you'd like that connection. We all want validation in our lives. That's a normal need for us as human beings. But if we continue to make these sacrifices and people don't actually know what our needs are, what ends up happening is that you want this recognition, but you're not getting it because people assume that this is within your capacity if you agree to it. It could lead to a sense of resentment and bitterness in your experience. So when the efforts are not being acknowledged, and because you can't actually set boundaries or maybe share how you feel, then you might be communicating it in passive aggressive behavior, which could be very confusing for people around you because they ask for something and there's a sense of like, why the hell are they asking? They know I can't say no. But really it's upon you to advocate for yourself and to negotiate with family. Life can get really stressful, plain and simple, right? Especially if you're someone who's, let's say, a mother or caring for someone who's elderly or going through school and are managing a lot of demands. If there isn't a balance between priorities, which are things for yourself, for your family, but mostly also how you're taking care of yourself and your energy, as well as, and then demands being things, requests from other people around you. If that becomes unbalanced, it could lead to a lot of stress because you're going to be able taking on a lot on your plate. You're going to overschedule. You're not going to care for yourself to be able to give back, actually. And that cumulative effect of this behavior ends up leading to burnout. So when we are burnt out, it makes it very hard to actually manage relationships, to show up in relationships in a healthy way, to be able to also manage stress on a day-to-day basis. And it could lead up to a lot of health problems, for instance, with increased stress. It could lead to a lot of difficulties in even connection. Now, this is also really important, right? Because people take advantage of you being agreeable at times. Maybe they're doing it actually intentionally or they're doing it unintentionally, right? There could be an unintentional way of manipulating you and using kind of emotions or guilting you into doing things, but you know you're going to say yes, right? Without setting any boundaries. And so, or it could make you actually very vulnerable, and it could put you in situations that are not healthy and difficult for you, and maybe even dangerous in a way emotionally, right? In relationships where you become more susceptible to being manipulated, or there could be abuse taking place. And if that is happening, then obviously you can't just stand up for yourself. You do need help to be safe, to create a plan, to get support. So it's important to keep that in mind, that those can be also interrelated. If we're in a toxic or unhealthy relationship, we need a lot of support around us to be able to identify it, to work through it, because that in and of itself could make us display the people-pleasing behaviors to be safe. So those are things to keep in mind, to be aware of, and to always get support for. I see a hand raised. I'm curious to know if there's a question, and you can definitely throw your questions in there, and I'll get to it right after this section. Relationships suffer. So forming relationships with the goal of earning the approval only, right? We want approval from people around us. We want to feel like what we're doing is being supported, is being, that people validate us. But with that being such a central goal, it becomes just a give and give relationship. And what often people don't think about, and I let folks know from a nervous system perspective, our nervous systems crave connection. They're built to do two things, really: to keep you safe and to keep you connected. And they will always choose safety and survival over connection. But oftentimes our survival is connected to connection and relationships, right? And so a part of not creating that stressful response in our bodies as well is that our nervous systems like to know, like people in our life also like to meet our needs. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel attuned to us. It makes them feel good knowing that, hey, I know that my friend likes this, or I know my friend appreciates that I don't call her at X and Y, Z time. Therefore, I'm going to respect it. And I'm going to be, and that feels good for me. I'm attuned to her. And then you can kind of respond with, hey, I loved when you did that. I so appreciated when you did X, Y, and Z, which could deepen a relationship. But when your relationship is focused on just earning the approval, it's just give, 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 it makes it really hard to be able to build an authentic connection with people around you. And this is where it comes back to, it's difficult to be authentic. We need authenticity in our life, right? We need to show up as our whole selves to know that we're accepted. This feeds into our nervous systems and tells us that, hey, you're safe, you can connect with this person, you can show up as you are. And finding it hard to recognize one's emotions, obviously, because when you continue suppressing things and you're not expressing your opinions, you're not getting that feedback from the environment, from people in your relationship, from the environments that you're in, of what you like or dislike or want, or what kind of emotions, which are your system's feedback, essentially, to tell you how what supports you and what hinders your growth or sustains you. So when you're not tuning in and listening to these cues over years, it becomes hard to actually be authentically yourself. And that's something that's felt in relationships at times, right? When you're just agreeing to everything and you're not coming in with your own opinions or dislikes or emotions, it creates actually a barrier in connection with other folks around you, because people want connection. Now, I want to be very mindful because as I've mentioned, myself alongside my brilliant team of therapists work with a lot of folks who are BIPOC identifying. And a lot of times what's really important to keep in mind is that we live also in systems of oppression that can make it hard for us to be our authentic self. And so sometimes it's not safe to be our authentic self, unfortunately. And that's a reality that we have to come to recognize. But it's also a reality that we have to acknowledge so that we can take care of ourselves in some of these workplaces where we can't be completely authentically ourselves, let's say. And so we can find communities where we do find safety, for instance, or we do work with some of the impact of living in systems that don't allow us to be authentic completely. And if you were to leave with anything, I hope you leave with this. We're not done with the presentation, but on this note right here, is that it is not your fault. So many times when I support folks who exhibit people-pleasing behavior, there's a lot of criticism. Why am I like this? Oh my God, I can't believe I said this again. Oh my God, I can't. And it's pretty normal for the stress response to activate criticism of yourself. But it's really important to know that this is a survival response that you've built over years. And so it's quite normal to take time, and you have to be kind to yourself and channel in actually that divine rahmah to be able to care for yourself in a way that helps you rewire your brain and your nervous system differently. Before I go into what's behind people pleasing, I'm going to get to the questions.
Yes, there is a question here, right?
Yeah.
And it was asked, how do you know that you are becoming better at overcoming people-pleasing tendencies? Like you've improved.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Okay. Yeah, lovely. So you know what? Could you take that question down and we can get to it at the end?
All right, got it.
Know that you've changed. Me being authentic is regarding as too straightforward or as spoken, outspoken, and the odd sheep in the group. Totally. It could feel like that. In many of our communities, I mean, I come from, I'm from an Arab background, when sometimes speaking up, let's say in a group of aunties or something like that, I'll definitely, even at almost 40 years old, I'll get scolded by my mom. Being like, nope, you can't say that, or you can't do, there's a lot of shaming. So I totally get that. I'm not sure what's noted and question noted, okay, or if you can elaborate. And then the hypervigilance, and we'll talk a little bit more about the hypervigilance. So we'll come to actually this slide right now. And let me then quickly actually answer that question. Sorry, I know I said to keep it to the end, but quickly, in terms of how you know things have changed, you have to really look at where the behavior is showing up most. And when you start to hone in, you have to like isolate it, right? And take it you're really dissecting things and you're slowly moving. This is what I mean. It's not like you're just going to change completely. You're changing small behaviors. The way you know is there's a reduction of anxiety as you continue to do something over and over and over again. There's also more connection with yourself. There's a more sense of feeling connected and grounded with yourself. You understand your needs more. You're understanding that you have a little bit more space for yourself, right? When you haven't done that for a long period of time, but it's small. And so it really builds on a practice over and over and over again, and elaborate more on that as well. And then I'll keep the hypervigilance as we talk about trauma here, okay? What is behind people-pleasing behavior? Simply broken down, it is, there are three kind of areas that I think about, and the three would be childhood experiences. Either you've had a traumatic experience or difficult experiences or lack of attunement. What I mean by lack of attunement is a parent being maybe not, just because of their own biology or their own history or their own learning and what they've inherited, not being able to understand your needs emotionally and meet them, right? And so there's a misattunement, which could lead to us feeling rejected, or over time, low self-esteem, low self-worth. And then lack of skill is also a part of it. And we'll talk a little bit about building skills with that. So the hyper-aware, and this is a part of the vigilance question, is that some of us have had, when I say trauma, I want you to think of trauma as an experience that has overwhelmed your nervous system to manage the difficulty of the experience, essentially, the stress of the experience that has been exposed to your system. You couldn't mobilize the system enough, or not you couldn't, the system in and of itself could not handle or tolerate the magnitude of the stressful event. So that's generally trauma. And this could happen in small instances where I have here in early relationships, maybe caregivers are either really harsh, they're only approving and affectionate if you did something that they wanted in a specific way, or what they asked for. So there isn't a sense of also giving you a sense of acceptance of your whole self, or allowing you to get to know your own needs and wants, and helping you and guiding you through that, which is really prophetic wisdom as well, in terms of bringing in guidance, teaching you, but also and guiding you, but also allowing you to explore your own needs for yourself and wants. And then, so you learn pretty quickly that if you act in a certain way, you get approval. And if you think back on what I said in terms of our nervous systems are designed to survive and connect, your nervous system will do what it needs to do to keep you safe. And if connection is, and that's why shame feels so unbearable, because if connection is on the line and that feels threatening, we're not going to get it. It's going to activate all defenses to make sure you're connected. Right? And that's why we need safe connections. And for parents here, I know for myself, when I first learned that, like, oh my God, I need to meet my son's needs, like every single need for him to be connected. No, you could take a breath. Research actually shows you need to be attuned, 30% of the time. And that should be enough. The magic happens when there's repair. When something doesn't go well and you're able to repair it, and the nervous system goes back to saying, oh, okay, I am valuable as I am, and I can make mistakes, and I can say no, and I'm still accepted, and I'm still respected. So hypervigilance takes time to, obviously, it's a part of a bigger, greater experience, as we talk about trauma, for instance, here. I can go back. So seeking safety is a part of hypervigilance, sense to be calmed down if you're people pleasing. And so what we start to do with hypervigilance is we start to notice where it's showing up, and we start to work on grounding the system down, you need your system to start to feel safe. And that's why people pleasing, when you start kind of addressing it, you're not addressing it in every situation. You're addressing it slowly in situations that feel somewhat tolerable, like maybe friends, or family, if friends are too hard to do that with. Both of these, the early childhood experiences, some of these traumatic experiences, are also obviously they influence the way in which we perceive ourselves, and we perceive the world. So what the world thinks about us, right? Our sense of self-worth, whether we believe that we're only valued if we produce something or we give something, or there's an inherent sense of worthiness, that for just being you, right? You're inherently valuable. You don't need to do something for someone to be valuable, and that you're inherently respected in this way. And so those obviously can be interrupted, as I said, with trauma or with some experiences sometimes where maybe we were in toxic relationships, or we have histories of toxic or abusive relationships, or intimate partner violence, for instance, that may have led us to believe that safety is only by appeasing people. And so you have to be gentle and compassionate to your system, the rahma again, that healing takes time, and that your system also deserves time to be able to create safety again. Of course, if this is a situation that's currently happening, that's where helplines like Nisa and trauma centers that can help you kind of work towards finding safety, right? Because we need building blocks. You need to be safe first, and your nervous system needs to experience safety before we move on to breaking these patterns, essentially. But yeah, keeping this in mind, that this is subconscious sometimes. So that's where the compulsive aspect of it, that your body's just trying to keep safe. Any other questions here before I move into how to disrupt people pleasing? Because that's going to touch base on some of the hypervigilance piece and some of how do we know.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions actually. So I think, would you want us to ask me now? It's 6 questions, just to be.
I see one question. Some of them are answered, or you just noted them? Okay.
We noted them. Yeah.
Okay. Let's maybe answer them after. I'm being mindful of time. Let's get through this, and maybe I would have addressed them just in doing that.
Okay.
Already, right? Okay, inshallah. So how do we disrupt people-pleasing behavior? We start to recognize the pattern. First, you need to build awareness. And that goes back to that question of how do I know things have changed? When you start to build awareness of the problem, you start to know how you're going to measure a change, right? So if you're always saying no to everything, or yes to everything at work, or to a specific person, then you know when you start to say yes, for instance, when you're saying yes to everything, you start to say no, or set boundaries, or communicate, or give alternatives, or negotiate your need, then things are improving, right? And it may not feel good to start off with, but that's why many times folks work with therapists, or they work with friends, or workbooks, or whatever it may be, to get some support to help them tolerate that experience. So some questions to help you build that awareness is, how do I feel if this person was disappointed in me? Can I tolerate disappointment? Right? When is the last time I said no to them? Is our relationship just based on this? Understanding that this is an overwhelming process, and that being kind to yourself is very important through this process. That disappointment piece is when we continue to be in relationships, especially early childhood relationships, where rejection has happened over and over again, it becomes intolerable to feel that sense of rejection and disappointment if someone's disappointed in you. And so then we start to build different relationships with maybe friends who, when you say no, accept it and respect it. And when that happens, you start to rewire the system. So your nervous system needs to experience something different, is the answer for it to heal. Practice being assertive. Through the tool, you'll be provided with a whole bunch of scripts to give you some options. You don't need to right away just say no. You can give alternatives, you can negotiate. I love that one answer where it's like, nah, I can't make the cake, but I'll buy you something, right? I'll send it with my husband because I'm going to get a facial if you really love it. So on and so forth. So you're negotiating. You don't need to start off with no right off the bat. But it's important to start by setting boundaries, by using I statements, right? working on understanding where you need to set that boundary. And do you feel a sense of obligation when you have to do that? Are you, will you be neglecting your own needs? How do you expect to feel after? And some of your questions of like, okay, well, there are people in my life who do this, right? Who are family. And I can't say no to them because, well, they're family. This is when you start to practice. This is what's important to understand, that healthy relationships respect your boundaries. Healthy relationships engage in negotiation with you. They support your well-being. And so if these relationships are not supporting your well-being, it's not, we can't really cut off a lot of people in our life from, let's say, the communities we come from, or some of the cultures that we're in. We're going to have a lot of these toxic behaviors show up, let's say. Not to say that our cultures are toxic, but with inherited trauma and some of that disruption that shows up. So keeping in mind that, okay, how can I create spaces where I can experience something different? How can I start to negotiate how much time I spend in those spaces? So that's also something. Looking for self-worth within. So we talked about how you need to rewire the nervous system differently to be able to show up differently. Like, you're not just going to be saying no. You're going to be practicing to build maybe competencies in areas where you feel confident. So you have a bit of that strength, even as I sit up, as I say strength, because there's a certain level of alignment that shows up, right? Practicing self-compassion and that rahma. Again, our spirituality and our source of spirituality and spiritual tradition is rooted in compassion and love. And so how can we invoke that, even if it's through dhikr, for instance, to be able to change the physiology and connect to compassion, learning to accept compliments. I know with a lot of people-pleasing behavior, there's a sense of like, you give them a compliment, they're like, no, it's X, Y, and Z. What would it be like to say, Alhamdulillah, thank you, that's really sweet of you, I appreciate that. Even changing the way you interact with the world can help you co-regulate differently. And then focusing on relationships that can help you co-regulate. I've said this many times, a nervous system approach needs time. So when you're thinking from using the wisdom of your system, you need to understand that your system needs time. And so I think we have a poll here before we go to questions on where do you find these issues show up mostly for you? Is it through work? Is it at home in your relationships with friends? So I guess at home and in your relationships are maybe the same. Okay. Great. Yeah, it's such an overwhelming number. Here I am talking about, us as BIPOC, maybe we have a lot of difficulty, which we do in work settings. But notice, it's mostly in relationships. And this whole kind of approach to healing is actually helping you reframe this understanding that it does heal relationships when you do lessen the amount of people pleasing that happens. Lovely. So yeah, so let's get to that. So I noticed that it's mostly with friends, some with friends, but it's mostly in relationships. And I'm guessing this means family, this means in-laws, this means, yeah, that's what I'm thinking in terms of relationships that show up for you. But I'll be curious to know too, if you want to type in something specific that maybe we didn't address here as well. Oh, it keeps showing up, I guess. Folks are letting in their questions. That's lovely. Right, so building awareness and doing all of that, something very important to mention here is that this work is going to create a lot of difficult emotions. And it's very important to build tolerance in the system. And so part of actually the toolkit that you'll be given at the end, or that's going to be shared with you, is a link to what's called distress tolerance. Skills that you practice slowly, ongoing, that help you tolerate distress. And for the interest of time, I'll just very quickly go over this. So how to be kind to yourself. I mean, at work, because we talked about the different places they show up. Here, we're focusing on quality work instead of just creating as much and saying no or saying yes to everything. We're focusing on efforts on quality, and that's a way to negotiate these boundaries with bosses and people around that, hey, I really need to focus on providing quality work here, and I need this time, for instance. Your confidence is appealing, and it is actually a morale booster, right? And once we create self-respect and we demonstrate self-respect, we're also able to then receive it in that way because we're respecting ourselves. And so it's kind of reciprocal in this way. At home is setting limits. So a lot of times, like I said, we can't say no to everything, let's say at home, or we're having difficulty, or that's the area of most difficulty for you. So setting limits. So even if it's going over to your in-laws that present you with the most amount of difficulty, let's say, right? Set a limit. You're still gonna go, but you're gonna leave at a certain amount of time, right? It's about negotiating and working with some of the distress and getting over, there's gonna be some difficulties. None of these skills are just gonna happen comfortably. There's going to be some discomfort, but things will, tend to balance out over a period of time when you do something different. So focusing on the action. Assigning responsibilities, so that's a negotiation piece, and then giving consequences for hurtful behavior. You can be loving and assertive. So you can be gentle, you could be compassionate, and still assertive at the same time. You don't have to forego being compassionate or gentle in your approach. And then with friends, they want us to obviously, they want to know the real us, right? And so here it's important to be able to share your opinions and needs so that they can meet them as well. And so I'm coming to the end now with closing mindfulness and affirmation practice. So maybe what I can do, because I'm at 42 minutes right now, I notice. So let me answer the questions and then I can go to the closing practice. How does that sound? Or you know what, actually, sorry, I know I went back and forth a few times, but I think it's actually more helpful to do the closing practice, the poll, and then spend time answering the questions. I have some capacity to answer it for a period of time, and then folks can come back to some of the questions that we answer. How does that sound for you folks? I only have Mariam here to tell me how it sounds. So I've laid a lot on you. I want to be able to, as a part of my practice, I want to be able to come back to some, bringing down some of that activation that might have taken place as we walk through this presentation. And so I want you to see if you can find a place that feels comfortable for you. This could be a place where, you're sitting down, you're you're lying down, or you're just being supported. So it's important to be supported, whether you have a pillow on your chest or you're connected to the backrest or to a wall. And so as you begin this practice, I want you to see if you can either lower your gaze or close your eyes. If it feels too activating, then you don't need to do that. You can just lower the gaze so that your gaze is focused somewhere. Just kind of straighten your shoulders. And you can start internally now with just the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we'll just begin a practice in the name of the compassionate, the most merciful Allah. And as we connect to our presence, to just the ever-present, the eternal now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we just connect to breath. So just see wherever you find your breath. It could be at the inhale, the exhale, but just focus on one area, whether it's at your belly or nostrils or chest. We're just starting with an inhale and then an exhale. See if you can make your exhale active. pressing down on your sit bones, on the backrest, just really getting a sense of the firmness of the surrounding around you. Those are also a point of rahmah, of support for us. You can take a hand on your heart, or you can place it on your belly if it doesn't feel activating for you, if it feels comfortable, and just feel the weight and heaviness. Huh? Settling into breath. So just actively noticing the inhale and the exhale as you soften your shoulders, your jaws. And I will be sharing a few words here with you. And I just want you to notice how they feel in your system, how they land for you. These are reminders that I want you to internally repeat to yourself. So as you inhale, you exhale, I'm practicing to choose myself. Remembering that choosing yourself is necessary to help you show up authentically. Taking a breath here, inhaling, expanding. Exhaling, I'm practicing to say no when I need to. Those who care for you respect your boundaries. I'm practicing to take better care of myself. Remembering that taking care of yourself is taking care of others around you. I'm practicing to find balance between my own needs and helping others. Those who care for your well-being will support your needs. Taking one last breath. And on the exhale, remember that you are valuable and worthy in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inherently worthy of love. And you can come back slowly. You can slowly open up your eyes if they've been closed. You can look around the room around you. Slowly come back. It's a pretty fast mindfulness practice. And for the interest of time, I'll keep it that way. I would have liked to take you deeper, but this is just a bit of a practice. So if it's hard for you to settle in, it's totally normal. We do have a sense of I've shared a few affirmations with you, and I would love to know when you're ready which of those affirmations land for you, or maybe which you're going to be taking with you. Miriam, I think this is your cue to put on the poll. And you notice here that there's a practicing, that you are practicing to do X, Y, and Z. You don't inherently need to believe that. This is something that takes practice. I love that, huh? I love that for all of you. Such a Many of you are trying to find that balance between your own needs and helping others. And what does that balance look like? Huh? I hope this, alongside the kit, could be of support for you, that you slowly, as you seek support and help. We have a lot of questions here, and I want to be mindful that if I don't get to your question, it is not because I don't find your question of worth or that I don't think your question is something that needs to be addressed, but it's simply because of the interest of time. And that, inshallah, will be able to, that you might find support on this and resources as well, as we share the toolkit with you. To help you navigate that, but I'll try to get to as many as possible. I'm going to stop sharing, inshallah. Lovely. Oh, so many of you can select a few. I love that. And so you've taken a few with these affirmations. Okay, let's get to your questions. Oops. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Zainab, for your presentation. Once again, it is 8 p.m., so I do want to be mindful of your time. Are you okay with answering a few questions?
I've allotted just about like 10 minutes after.
Okay.
And so I try to get to it as best as I can, but I won't be able to get to all of them, of course.
Yes, that is totally fine. We really appreciate that you gave us 10 minutes after your committed time.
How is that for you?
For us, that's completely fine for me.
Okay,
Thank you for checking in with me.
With you. Yeah, I was like, okay, I didn't check in with
that's
you.
Something a psychotherapist would do. You know?
No. Okay. Yeah, no, totally. It's okay. Fitting with the title too. So that's true. Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry, were you gonna say something, Mariam?
No, I'm just going to say that I'm going to get to the question then, inshallah. Okay. And then we can see how many we get.
I see the questions, by the way.
Okay.
So I can read them out loud and answer the one that I feel comfortable or have time to answer. Okay. You've answered all of them by saying noted, correct?
Yes, I did not answer any except for the technical questions or logistical questions.
Okay, cool. We've already answered how you come to overcome people-pleasing tendencies. I think I've gone over that with you. Again, I've gone over that and I've shared lots of examples because I know it's usually most of the folks I support in my practice, it's because their in-laws are not giving them space or too pushy. And so we've shared lots of practices that I hope you can go back to in terms of how you slowly building that. They're building blocks, huh? This is not an overall approach, and it's also individualized. That's also very important. How people pleasing shows up, as you saw, there are many signs, and it correlates with many different experiences. So it's quite personalized to your own experience as well. And so that's always really important to think about. So for the community here, this question is about toxic friendships, and that we tend to focus a lot on toxic couples and maybe family dynamics, but not enough on friendships. And I love that you've highlighted that for us, huh? Right. And so, as I mentioned through, and a part of, and this question is really asking like, hey, we don't focus on that. This is in terms of where you want to listen to them for hours and don't cut them off. And I want to avoid being blamed or being accused. And a part of healthy friendships is not being blamed or being accused, right? And the thoughts here, I'm not really for, I know a lot of, sometimes folks get a lot of misinformation because, let's say on TikTok or therapists, it's just like, cut them off, never talk to your friends. But really, you need connection. And so it could take time for you to learn skills and to start to slowly bring it up. Maybe not when they're, venting to you, but at another point to just say, hey, I've noticed that sometimes when I bring up X and Y, Z to you, you haven't responded in a way that feels supportive to me, for instance. Or you've said this and it really hurt me. Do you think we can do X, Y, and Z and you'd be able to tolerate that? I really appreciate you and the friendship, and I love to deepen that, right? So this is where you're being compassionate and gentle, but you're also being firm at the same time. Like, I'm not going to tolerate talking for 3 hours when I have to go to bed. And I hope you can understand that, right? And you can get help, right? Through, we've shared some tools with you in terms of starters. You can get help through books. Dialectical behavior therapy has a lot of books on ways to learn interpersonal effectiveness, as well as obviously therapy and having other people in your life, other friends who do tolerate that, so that you can get a sense of like, hey, this is what it's supposed to feel like when I express my boundary. Self-advocacy comes with a lot of, the question here is assertive training. Yes, gaining the skills to be assertive is a part of advocating, but also a part of advocating is what's stopping you from advocating, right? What's your history like? So you need to also understand your own history, what's led to you not being able to stand up for your needs. So that's a part of the skills that I've mentioned, that the roadmap essentially, that you need to build tolerance to maybe anxiety that shows up when you can't tolerate discomfort and self-advocacy, and you also need to be able to learn the skills of assertiveness training, but also understanding, where does this stem from? How can I be able to heal it so that my nervous system knows safety differently? Of course, I want to be mindful that this is not, obviously I'm giving thoughts on this, but this is not necessarily therapy or instead of therapy. And this is simply to help you get started on that road. And again, it needs to be pretty individualized for you. How do we set boundaries with parents without being disrespectful and saying no? Great question. So, I'll link actually, I don't know if we have, maybe Mariam, you can do it as I'm looking for it, but if you can just look up wellness, feeling guilt, I think, or parental feeling guilty, put parents and feeling guilty, something like that. It could give you.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Maybe you can link it in the chat here. So this is some way to help you get a better sense of how do you set boundaries. You set them respectfully, but you still set them. And so you can set them by validating, for instance, the feelings, by being gentle. That's a part of maintaining relationships. Just saying, I know this is really hard. I know I would have loved to do this for you, but this will, and then give them a bit of almost a reinforcer. Like if, by doing X, Y, and Z, it's going to make me be able to come back a lot more, for instance, or it's going to improve our relationship in this and that. People also need to know, if they were to respect this for you, what would that mean for your relationship together, right? And so it's important to tell them that this is how it's reinforced. This is a question about Islamically handling something, because I don't want to step too much outside of my own scope of practice, right? And hand out Islamic guidance necessarily, but my practice when I work with Muslim identifying folks it's obviously faith informed and Islamically informed, in that respect, compassion is also there, as well as advocating for your own needs. And I mean, that's been pretty present in our history in terms of advocating for ourselves as a community and doing it with compassion. And so people that are traumatic, I mean, if it's trauma, then this is more of a nuanced response, I think, and how you can work to keep yourself safe, because I wouldn't want you to be in spaces that are traumatic. So it's a little bit more nuanced. I wouldn't be able to get too much into it with the time left, I'm afraid. Right. And so some of the questions, and maybe this would be the last two, is that, a sense of obligation. A part of these tendencies is that we do feel a sense of obligation. And so I hope if you were to take something about this from the presentation or from this workshop, it's really the understanding that relationships are about give and take, because that's what deepens connection. You are not, even with parents, right? We do have Islamically a sense of obligation to our parents, but we also have a sense of obligation to our children, to friends, to ourselves, right? To take care of ourselves, to create spaciousness so that our own journey with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we face him alone, we've also had space and time to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So taking care of ourselves is actually also about part of our spiritual practice in this way. And so you can balance obligation with negotiation, respect for yourself, respect for the other person. Understand that there are many other obligations also in your life. There isn't a single obligation that you're balancing, and how you manage your energy is very important. How do we book with Zainab? You can just connect with us on wellnest.ca, and we'll be happy to connect with you there. So thank you for that. Or no, there is a tangible consequence to it. Depends on the consequence. So there's always going to be a consequence. When I hear you say and I like Mariam's response in elaborating, because I don't know what that consequence means. If that consequence means your safety, then like I said, and I've mentioned over and over again, this is something that you're going to need support with. You are not going to want to go down that journey alone, but there's often consequences, right? People might get disappointed in you. But as we continue to say no and tolerate disappointment and create space and do it mindfully, but do it also with kindness, but also with assertiveness, we start to understand that, hey, it's okay, especially with people in our life that respect us. It's okay for them to be disappointed in us. Sometimes we're also disappointed in people that we love, but we still love them, right? So it shouldn't impact their love towards us or their care towards us. That it's quite okay for people to be disappointed in us. That doesn't mean we're not worthy. And it's really about them. There was a need not met for them. Why would they not be disappointed? It's totally normal. So you can validate that for them too. I understand it's disappointing for you. I love you so much. And maybe we could do X, Y, and Z, give alternatives or so on and so forth. You're negotiating with the relationships always, right? But you can tolerate disappointment. It feels really bad, and you can tolerate it as you build practice. You might not tolerate it now, but as you build practice. But I think that's all I'm gonna answer for questions. Thank you all so much. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. Alhamdulillah to see all of you here, and I do hope that inshallah you found it of benefit as well. And thank you to you, Mariam, and the organization and Nisa helpline for this opportunity to be able to share this with folks here today.
Okay. Thank you so much, Zainab, for your thorough answers for every question. And you actually addressed every question. So alhamdulillah.
Oh, did
Thank
I?
you so much.
Okay. I thought I
Yes,
was
you
missing
did.
some. Okay.
No, you did not miss anything. I was keeping track of everything.
Okay.
And yes, you did mention everything. So once again, yeah, thank you so much for answering those questions and for the great total presentation. It was an absolute pleasure to have you with Nisa Helpline. And inshallah, we're looking forward to more future collaborations.
Inshallah, inshallah. Same here.
Same here, inshallah. Once again, for those who have registered on Zoom, you guys will be receiving a self-help guide. Okay, that was created by Zainab. All right, that will come to your inbox soon, inshallah. And if you did not register, you can still go to our website and register over there. All right. Other than that, we will have more workshops until the end of the year, inshallah. So please go to our social media channels. On Instagram, we are super active. Please go and like our channels, right? Stay up to date on our YouTube for more informative workshops by experts. And inshallah, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I'm staying back.